Hello, in this part of the lecture we're going to be looking at using biomechanics to evaluate job demands. Say you have this employee on site and you see him performing this lift. You might think, well, this looks pretty heavy. Is this a problem job? Do I need to worry about it? Do we need to install controls? Do we need to make changes to this to improve it? And you start observing, well, he is lifting a pretty heavy sack, and so that could be a problem. It looks like it's hard to grip, but he is using a squatting lift. He's using his legs. He's bending at the knees. His back is pretty upright, so maybe it's not an issue. Maybe it is. Looks like it's a little bit difficult, and so it's, well, does this job need to be fixed or not? And it might somewhat depend on, have you had injuries in the past? But is this a job with injury potential? Or what about this job? You can see that obviously they're not using what you think of as being proper lift techniques. They're using more of the back, one in a very extreme back posture. So it could potentially have problems, but is it, again, bad enough to have an increased risk of injury? Here it's like, well, our back's pretty upright, but what about our shoulders? We know lifting above the head is a problem, and so is this a problem job? It seems like every job has some ergonomic considerations, but are they really do they really merit changing? And so we're going to use biomechanics to try to answer those questions. We're going to be using a biomechanical model. And for us, we'll be focusing on a two-dimensional model that is also known as a stick person or stick person model. Just as an aside, there is a three-dimensional model out there, and some of you might be using that. That tends to run more expensive, need a little bit more background and knowledge. And so I'm going to give you enough to do the starter, the two-dimensional model, and you can always move up if you wish or have access to it. With the two-dimensional model, you can see on my screen that I've got a person, the lifter that I showed in the first screen. To make him a stick person, I just I had just added his body segments as lines, so as sticks. He has a lower arm segment that has a joint at the elbow, has an upper arm segment that has a joint at the shoulder, a torso segment that has a joint at the hip, upper leg that has a joint at the knee, and lower leg that has a joint at the ankle. And so we have 5 body segments. We have those 5 joints. But in addition, ErgoWeb will also give you information on what's happened in the low back joint. And so the joint where the 5th lumbar meets the 1st sacral vertebrae, and so that joint. That's the most injured part of the back and material handling, and so provides that extra information for you. The stickman model is, we could go back to last week and you'll see it's very, very familiar. The stick person, if we broke that up into each of those individual body segments, this would be modeled as a kinematic chain. Starting with our lower arm, at our lower arm we have from the elbow to our hand holding the load. We know that the load is going to have a load weight that will have an effect on our body, will create stress in our body as we try to resist gravity's pull to the ground. We know that our lower arm segment has a weight associated with it, so a body weight of the lower arm. Those two forces are both being pulled towards the earth due to gravity, and so at our elbow internally we must have a reactive moment that's equal but opposite direction, so an upward direction, so that our lower arm segment does not translate down to the ground. So we have an equal and opposite force there. But we see that these 3 forces are all going in a clockwise direction. They're going clockwise. We must have something inside internally that stops our lower arm from rotating, and so that is a muscle moment at the elbow. So we have a muscle moment that our muscles are contracting to stop this rotation. Okay, so this is for our lower arm segment. Given a load weight, given a weight of our lower arm, given how long our arm is, we could find what this vertical EY and our moment at our elbow is. We could calculate that. If we moved up So in this kinematic chain, if we moved up and went to our lower arm from our shoulder down to our elbow, we would see that, well, our elbow isn't translating in space, and so for this upward direction on the lower arm, we must have a downward equal but opposite on our upper arm. Likewise, our shoulder or our elbow isn't rotating, so we must have an equal but opposite rotation that's occurring on the bone in our upper arm. And so equal but opposite, so we have a moment at the elbow here. Our upper arm has a weight associated with it, with a body weight associated with it. Again, with those two downward, we must have a reactive force happening at our shoulder. And everything is translating, or everything is rotating clockwise, and so at our shoulder, the shoulder muscles must be creating a torque that is in the opposite direction, a counterclockwise moment. Okay, and again, once we solve everything here in our lower arm, we would plug it in equal but opposite in our upper arm. We'd know the weight of our upper arm, how long our upper arm length is, so we could solve for m sub s and s sub y. And likewise, we could do the same thing with a torso, with the upper leg, with the lower leg. But it's very, very repetitive. Once you have something that's repetitive, well, the computer can do that for us. And so we're going to switch to a piece of software that will run those sorts of calculations that we did last week. It will do it for us within a very specific constrained set of tasks. So the software we're going to be using is ErgoWeb. It's at ergoweb.com. Within the main page of ergoweb.com up here, there's a place that says ergonomic software, so we're going to be clicking on that. Within that, the next thing is going to give you a subscriber access, so we'll click that. It will ask us then to enter our account email and password. These are given in your homework assignment. Please note this is not your personal email. You cannot enter your personal email. You don't have a password for that. There's no account created. You'll need to use the class account email and password that you can find in your homework assignment. And so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a browser so I can get onto ErgoWeb's site. Type in ergoweb.com. ergoweb.com. It'll bring up that main screen you just saw in my PowerPoint. Within that, we're going to click on this ergonomic software in the center of the screen. Here it's going to bring up the Job Evaluator Toolbox screen, the JET screen. We're going to click on Subscriber Access since Murray State's already subscribed to it. So Subscriber Access. This is where you enter the email address of the account. And so check your homework here for my recorded section. It's at ergo@murraystate.edu. But again, check your homework if it's to see if it does differ. Password, I'm going to go ahead and enter that. Again, for the Murray State account. Sign in, and it's going to bring you to a grid for different sorts of tools that are available. We're going to be focusing this one on 2D static biomechanical model. So within the tool region, these are all clickable links. We're going to stick with the 2D static biomechanical model. Click on that, and it's going to bring you to a screen that looks something like this. Okay, so blank screen, something may be loading. It's going to tell you there's a 2D biomechanical tool version. I want you to click into the 2D biomechanical tool beta version. So click into the beta version. And I'll bring a screen like this. Okay, within this screen there's going to be some inputs on the left-hand side of this entry screen, and in the PowerPoint I'm just going to work down from top to bottom this input screen. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. Okay. Just a side note, if you do go to a screen that provides this version, this is an older version of the 2D biomechanics, I don't want you to use that. That requires Java. It was spinning on my wheel. I didn't have it installed, so don't go to that. Instead, you want to go to this year it's the beta version, but the beta version that has a gray background with a black stick person. Okay, so that's the one you want to use. The units within this screen, the units are going to be English by default. I do want you to stick with that. If you ever needed metric, you could bubble the metric. So that's the first part. Second part of the inputs is you're looking at the employee, the lifter, the material handler. You need to decide, is that a male or a female? Okay, so is your lifter male or is it female? Defaults to male, so I'm going to leave that clicked. Next, for the individual, you need to identify their body size. So go back anthropometry. Anthropometry, you can either enter the industrial percentile, and so you can click that box and pick a fifth, a small, an average 50th, or a large 95th. So for example, say I wanted 95th. Okay, so I would be looking at a 95th percentile male would be who my employee is. But I have any of those choices. You can either do that, or if you left this unclicked, the industrial percentile unclicked, that means you won't be filling out any of those. Instead, you can enter the individual lifters' weight, body weight. In this case, by default, it starts at 166 pounds. So that's a type in, 166. And enter their stature. By default, on this default screen, it started at 70 inches. Okay. So you could enter your own height, your own weight, your own sex if you're analyzing yourself at home. Otherwise, it'd be your employee. After that, you have task description. Task description, the type is a lift lower. Again, default lift lower, but you could also use this biomechanical model to look at pushes or pulls. I'm going to have you focus on lifting. You can identify both hands by default, but you could also identify a one hand. And then object weight. Object weight will be how much weight are you lifting. That ties into your load out here. If you're lifting a 50-pound box, if you're lifting a 6-pound shovel, if you're lifting a 20-pound child, it's just asking you to enter the weight. It starts default 1 pound. You know you want to change that, and so maybe I have a 40-pound box. Okay, so type that in. And then lastly, it's going to ask you for posture. Posture, it asks you for angles from horizontal, and so we'll get to that in our next lecture segment. But I do want to show you one other way to get posture, which we'll be moving to. But before I do, hand location, positioning mode, just ignore those. I don't think that both are functional right now, but we will be ignoring those. I'm going to switch over to the ErgoWeb in browser so that I can show you how to get the body posture. Okay, you can enter the body posture by clicking in and entering a set of degrees. So posture in degrees. To give you a better idea of this, what if I did, I don't know, a 90 degree here. Okay, so you can see that if I click in and put in a number here, it's going to change my body posture. Okay, so we'll be looking at that in the next lecture. But for right now, I also want to let you know that if you highlight, you put your mouse over one of the body segments, such as the torso here, that I can highlight it, click and drag, highlight, click and drag. Oops, I have to highlight it first before I can actually click and drag it. Okay, so I can move the body posture here. You use this if you have a photograph, an image of your employee lifting, so you would keep manipulating his body segments until by eyeballing it, it closely matches what your photograph is. So you can do that. So you can keep playing with it. If you were doing a squat, if you had a straighter back in the squat, you could keep manipulating this until it very closely matched it, and again by eyeballing. So you could find that out. Your force angle, just by note here, force angle, we're going to leave it by default that I am doing a lift or lower in this course. Okay, so I've manipulated my stickman to get the posture I want, but there's an alternative way is to enter these numerical values. So I'm going to go back to the screen, my PowerPoint. You can measure those angles using a goniometer in real life. A goniometer is just essentially a large protractor. So if you have a real life person that you're taking the measurement of the angles at each of their joints, you can use a protractor. For this class, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and purchase a protractor rather than a goniometer. A protractor, you can get one for $1, $1.50 or so. We're going to be using a protractor to find the angles at these joints. Protractor, there are several different styles of protractors. So if you go out and buy one at the dollar store, at Walmart, an office supply store, you can buy your basic protractor. Basic protractor will work just fine. This is still your basic, but a little bit colorful. That'll work just fine. If you want to buy a protractor that has this swing arm, it could help you out. That's fine too. Whichever style you prefer, whichever you have access to, they'll all work to get the job done. Before you move on to the next lecture, you might want to go ahead and have your protractor ready. I'm going to step through how you use it, and since yours might differ, might have a slightly different direction of the scale, it would probably be helpful for you to have yours handy as I'm describing how to use one.